Well, there are two things that drew me to technology. I was born in Spain, and my father was a civil engineer, and he had an office at home with all the drawing boards, but also some scientific calculators. So as a little kid, I got into the calculators and started programming them, Hewlett-Packard calculators, and I found that fascinating. You could take anything, anybody, and tell them what to do, and they would do it. It was absolutely shocking for me. I was also, as I was growing up, I read a lot. And I read not only scientific books, but also read a lot of science fiction. And once again, understanding science fiction as science that hasn't happened yet also made me very interested in information technology and computers. Now, this is the part that took me to a technical background where I created companies and I served for the universities. But then I decided to study more because my first approach to this was just technology. Is there anything that I can do to technology to solve a problem, to just address an inefficiency and opportunity there to make it better with computers? But then after that, I realized, well, hold on a second. This is not only a technical solution, but is this something that can be used either to make money or save money or efforts? And this is what drew me to have the intersection also of teaching, but the intersection of the business side of the equation. But then beyond that, as I practiced technology for many, many years in different roles, then I started thinking, well, sometimes I see technology implementations that are just not right, that don't take into account the privacy or the security of people, that end up hurting sometimes the same people that were supposed to be served by that technology. And this is part when I decided to pursue my doctoral education at Georgetown University. And the doctoral education also, once you start reading academic papers, almost for sure you're going to end up doing some sort of teaching, because all those words that you now can master, all those paradigm shifts and all those wonderful things are things that you want to communicate to other people, so you spread the knowledge that you have been accumulating for a long time. So it was that intersection of factors, an interest for technology, an interest for teaching, and an interest for ethics that brought me into my current roles of being a university executive in technology functions, as well as a faculty member for a number of institutions in the US and other countries. Well, I'm a firm believer in artificial intelligence, and it's not like most people who became experts 2 or 3 years ago because they put something on ChatGPT and ChatGPT replied to them. Actually, many years ago, we created the Center for Artificial Intelligence Digital Policy in Washington, D.C., on which board I'd served, and we started considering the implications of artificial intelligence and the policy requirements that governments and organizations need to put around artificial intelligence to make sure that this is a technology that will benefit society, will benefit customers and users, and that we have a policy that will curtail the abuses so that there are no disproportionately underserved or discriminated people when we use artificial intelligence. Now, the promise is there, but I recently read a book by our colleagues at Princeton called AI Snake Oil. And like many other technologies, there's a hype around artificial intelligence by which is supposed to solve every single problem. Well, it won't. It can do a number of things very well, like generative AI, where it can compose text. It can do machine learning, where it can read text. But still, there are many things where artificial intelligence is not particularly good. And that is, for example, predicting the future when there are human beings involved. So for me, applications in academia where we may rely on AI to help us choose what students should go to our schools or what grades they should get or what employees should be part of our institutions, I think those are the wrong applications for artificial intelligence. I think instead that artificial intelligence is going to help us be more productive. It's going to improve our administrative processes, which need improvement because, well, these are difficult economic times for everybody, and we need to deliver more output with less resources. The second part that is very important is as vendors that we already do business with, those who run our student systems, financial systems, human resources systems, those who provide our email and other productivity tools, they are going to offer artificial intelligence in their tools, and we're going to judiciously accept those offerings and adopt them in our institutions. Now, there is, of course, the part where people are going to conduct groundbreaking research for those of us who work for Research One institutions, and they're going to do something fantastic by training their AI models. But most universities, I don't predict, will do this just for administrative functions. They will either rely on a commercial partner who can do that for them because they have the expertise, or simply they will rely on off-the-shelf offerings from their traditional vendors to incorporate these technologies. Finally, I see that students are already benefiting tremendously because in the past, if I explain an ethical concept related to technology and somebody didn't understand, all they could do when they were preparing an essay or a team paper or a final exam was just to go on Google and try to figure out what I was trying to say, perhaps even try to make an appointment with me so I could explain it. Right now, I'm going to be honest, many of our students in all the institutions all over the world are using ChatGPT. And hopefully, most of them who are working with advanced professors are not using ChatGPT to teach. They're using ChatGPT to make sure that they understand the technology and the questions better, and to make sure that those technologies are going to help them as they join the knowledge economy. And of course, I'm using the ChatGPT example, but there are many other great artificial intelligence services out there. Well, I think that most good leadership, whether it has to do with technology or risk management or security or education, is principled leadership. So institutions must have a series of principles in order to engage in digital transformation. The first one is very clear. What is the mission of your organization? If you're there to educate the next generation of knowledge workers, make sure that you're doing that correctly. Make sure that the technology that you're implementing, the processes that you're upgrading, the protections and risk management controls that you put in place, all of them support that particular mission. If your mission is research, or maybe both education and research, then once again, make sure that your principles, your projects, your strategies, they all support that particular mission. Don't fall for the trap, as some of us have done over the years, where either a good deal or a very influential board member or faculty member or administrators can lead us astray from the real mission of the institution just because there's a flashy technology that promises a match to our constituents, and sometimes it's not delivered on those promises. Now, the other principles that are important are usually encoded in the mission and vision statement of the organization, but also in the policies of the institution. So things like transparency is very important. If we're monitoring employees, then we must tell them that the expectation for working in that particular organization is that their work will be monitored, maybe to prevent insider threats, maybe to prevent intellectual property leakages or theft, or maybe to comply with research regulations. For example, always use privacy and security by design. It's not that we're going to put or adopt the system first, and once we have it in place, then we're going to start thinking about privacy and security. No, we must do the privacy and security assessments and considerations as part of the implementation process. And to the extent that sometimes we must rule out some partners because their offerings do not offer the level of security or privacy that we expect. When you look at privacy, things about important things like data minimization. In higher education, we love to hoard every possible piece of data because we think it's going to be helpful eventually. Well, it turns out that it is not always helpful. And when it's not fully protected, and many of us have had attacks on our systems and data leaks, then the more data we hoard, the more data we have to notify and discuss with regulators at the time of fixing the problem. And then finally, I like to recommend to everybody to consider responsible computing, where you're considering not only that something works, but is it good for society? Is it good for the environment? Is this responsible computing going to hurt some categories of individuals while providing additional benefits to others? Those are the considerations that all of us as technology leaders and the rest of the executives dealing with technology in an organization must consider before we engage in major digital transformation projects. It's clear to all of us that we're facing a perfect storm, whereas for many institutions, there are fewer applicants. And certainly the students are the livelihood, the financial flow that we need in order to continue to operate, in addition to endowments and research, and maybe for public institutions, whatever tax contributions are made from their state legislatures, whatever fund contributions. But it turns out that there is less money available. And not only that, it turns out that it costs more than ever to operate a university. We have suffered inflation in salaries. We have an incredible set of regulations and compliance requirements that demand that we hire scores and scores of administrative personnel who are doing verification of the different state and federal and sectorial rules that apply in higher education, not only for the student businesses and education, but also maybe finance, like Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, being a financial services institution to some extent, PCI compliance for the credit card payments that we take, cybersecurity, model maturity certification if you're doing research with DoD funding. I mean, tons of requirements. And because of these requirements, then institutions might say, we don't have enough money to do everything. And one of the first things that institutions are going to cut, of course, is no more travel for employees, no more training for employees, and then we start delaying technology updates. Now, here's an interesting part. It's a little bit like shooting yourself in the foot because you're not making your institution as productive as it could be. But we understand that in a difficult year, you must cut corners, and certainly technology upgrades that can be deferred, that can be still implemented 2 to 3 years down the road, may be an opportunity. Something very important is that sometimes, as they say in Eastern Europe, you are too poor to buy cheap things. And this may be true about delaying some of the updates. If you increase the risk of a major data leak resulting in money losses, reputational damage, regulatory actions, for example, as well as costly forensics litigation and many others, in the end, you didn't save any money. All the money you thought you saved made everybody more miserable, increased the risk for your organization, and certainly did not improve the bottom line. So even when cuts and delays are necessary, organizations must be very judicious and listen to the technology leaders, the CISO, the CIO, the experts on unique academic systems to figure out what are the trade-offs of delaying all of those upgrades. Now, the other part that is very interesting is that sometimes we must think long-term. So, for example, we find ourselves that by making very short-term decisions for next year, for the next 6 months, we end up missing on economies of scale, or we end up missing on strategic acquisitions that can pile on top of each other. We've seen many of us, for example, that there are many institutions that end up running different enterprise resource planning systems for the student and finance and human resources. In most cases, it's not the most efficient way to proceed if one institution can really put all their eggs with one vendor and have synergies and economies of scale, as well as better integrations of those three platforms. Well, the good news about being a futurist is that I will either be right and can congratulate myself, or you will forget my predictions by the time arrives to check whether or not they were accurate. So with that, I believe that, of course, we're going to see a number of technologies that will be applicable for everybody, like general and generative AI, and maybe agentic AI, where they're going to help us purchase things and make appointments and contact other people. All of these things are going to transform higher education, as well as pretty much any other business that we can think of, because most businesses and organizations are now digital businesses and organizations. Now we're going to see great possibilities in research out of two very interesting technologies working together. Certainly AI, but I'm talking about the core AI and deep AI, the engines that allow us to do heavy mathematical related computation, as well as predictive AI, however faulty it is. And this combined with quantum computing, which is still it's in its infancy, but promises an incredible amount of computing power. So these two technologies together, plus additional storage and convenience in cloud services and graphic microprocessors, are going to give us computing capacity that we had never had before, And not only that, but computing capacity that can be put in the hands of many different researchers to really make a difference, solving some of the intractable problems that we have to solve in the environment, health sciences, the economy, and technology, and everything hopefully for the betterment of humankind. Now, I see other technologies, as I mentioned before, as we adopt AI and the students are using AI in order to be trained, then they're going to be very smart when they join the workforce. And they're going to know how to use these tools in order to really make a contribution for the organizations where they work. So they're going to be able to be much productive. They will be able to hit the ground running much faster than past generations of students were, because of the disconnect between what we teach in classrooms and what companies and organizations read on the ground. And when you can ask a good AI engine that has been fully trained either by your company or by a provider of your company, and you can ask key questions about how to perform your job duties, and you augment that with your interactions with peers, with clients, with coworkers, and certainly with your supervisors, then you find that our next generations of knowledge workers, our next employees coming from the schools today are going to be spectacular employees. I think that all of us want to do the right thing for the organizations we serve. And we all got into this business because we were interested in education and research. But there are many ways to be distracted, particularly as technologies become more complex, like artificial intelligence, which is very hard to explain. It's very easy to fall for the fallacy that this is going to solve all my problems. Once again, in order to solve problems, one must have clear thinking, strategic thinking, a clear vision of what is it that you're trying to do, the constraints to do it according to the values of your organization, and then be very disciplined about it. Have good managerial and leadership approaches in order to make sure that all of these complex projects and investments and organizational development projects end up really benefiting the institution. And let's be absolutely honest, there's a concern that the government may not be efficient. Well, I have good news for everybody. We all know that universities are not the most efficient of organizations, but also private sector companies are not efficient. They make mistakes. They launch products that don't work. They overinvest in some departments and then invest in others. So the idea is to say, how can I try to be as efficient as possible within the constraints of my institution? And once again, of course, clear thinking ahead, taking into account the technologies that are out there that may help us, and partnering with the technology providers that are already helping us, that build our student systems and financial systems and our productivity platforms and our research lab equipment, and work with them, asking them, listen, we need certain improvements, please deliver those to us, and let's find a good partnership where it makes financial sense for us to continue paying you for services and products and support, and for you to develop those systems that are going to help us complete our mission.